So earlier we were talking about Eloise and what happens with Eloise. I just kind of wanted us to go over what we talked about. I'll go first.
Okay. You want to run through your whole theory? Do you want to go from the point Eloise uh leaves for the real world to where she is in season 3? Is that how you want to
Okay,
do it?
I'll even do one better
Go on, go for it.
because my theory is we were going to talk is intertwined with both things that we were going to talk about. We were going to talk about what happens to Eloise, and we were going to talk about the bracelet. And so mine, I'll just start with the bracelet and go right into what I think happens with Eloise. Because mine's is very simple for the
Sure,
bracelet.
sure. Go for it. Go for it.
Um,
The
okay,
floor
so for the
is yours.
bracelet,
Sorry, I interrupted you there. I'm going to say the floor
oh
is yours.
no,
I
go
will
ahead.
not I will not speak until you say, and that is my theory, or whatever it is you want to do.
All right, that'll work. That'll work. Okay, cool. Okay, so and that's your all right. Sorry, all right. That's my theory. All right, that's where we'll stop at. Okay, got it. All right, so as far as the bracelet is concerned, we find the bracelet where we first saw the bracelet, the audience, we first saw the bracelet in the storage room, and then we seen it at the Matthews house. And she took it to the Matthews house, and Ethan, she's sitting there at the table looking at the bracelet. Ethan asks her, "What are you doing?" She says, "I'm trying to find I'm looking at this piece of Lonely Dragon's treasure." That's when that makes her decide to uh dig in the basement. Okay. That's what made her decide to dig in the basement, was sitting there pondering how in the hell did she find this bracelet. She's sure that it's the exact bracelet that she made. And we see the lights flicker while she's talking to Ethan about the Lonely Dragon's treasure. The lights flicker. That makes her go to the basement and want to dig up in the basement. She begins to dig in the basement. Jim comes home and asks her what she's doing. And she says that she wants to figure out where the the electricity comes from. Now she wants to figure out where that electricity comes from. So she's digging in the basement. She tells that to Jim, and she tells him to look on the shelf and look at the bracelet. She says, "No, it's not. Oh, this is like the bracelet you made." "No, it's not like the bracelet. That's it," she says. She points out the mistake that she made, and he's like, "Yeah, I remember that is the mistake, because I told you that that's what makes it great, and that's what makes it one of a kind." And so they also talk about how they lost the bracelet. He says that he lost it at the hospital at Julie's birth. Now, how I think that bracelet ends up in Fromland is Eloise has a dream of Tabitha's birth, and she takes the bracelet in some way and brings it back to Fromland, where Victor's mom is. I believe that because I also believe that while what we're shown, Eloise has the ability to see into different times. She was able to see the Ferris wheel. She was able to see the Civil War soldiers. These are in her drawings. And she was also able to see Tabitha's vision of the ghoulish kids. And she painted that outside of Fromland. And we see also another vision of Tabitha's was the cave cage inside. Um, We see the cages in the tunnels. We see bird cages in the tunnels. And we see bird cages in the basement next to Victor's father and by the paintings. I believe that Eloise is able to see in different time periods, and she saw Jim's bracelet and took it with her, and that's how her mother ends up with the bracelet. I believe that because typically when a man is going into the delivery room, they make him scrub up just like the nurses and the people attending to the mother. They make him scrub up and wear the same gown. He has to take his jewelry off and put his gloves on. His so this happens. And that's that happens. I'm thinking she had a dream about it and brought it back with her. I'm thinking time went on, the mother donned the bracelet, and uh I believe that I just had a thought. It could be that Eloise was wearing the bracelet and Victor's memories were not actually reliable. That could be a possibility. That's possible. Um, Also, it's either him or the mother. I don't believe that Victor will find his mother's body, take the bracelet off, and leave it in the storage room because it seemed like he cherished things that his mother owned. At like her violin. I believe Eloise makes it out, and if we back up a little bit, when Victor, his mom, and Eloise ended up in Fromland, I believe that Victor's father was probably accused of doing something with them, of doing something to them, and it was hard on him. I believe that then his daughter pops back up, and now he's got this traumatized daughter from what she's gone through. She starts putting bottle trees in the tree and painting these weird paintings, scary looking paintings. And the neighbors that just ostracized this man for possibly killing his family and doing something to his family, the neighbors probably felt like something was wrong with this girl. The father probably felt like something was wrong with her. He either didn't believe her or he was the only person that believed her. He ended up taking her to some sort of therapy and help, probably the priest. And the priest suggested that this girl be institutionalized, probably. I believe that could be a possibility. I believe the other possibility is the father did or didn't believe her. The children and youth services may have gotten involved in some way and taken Eloise from the father after her existence vindicates him from doing any crime. And she grew up and had a great life. And that could feed into your theory about her becoming a an artist, a real high class artist, and that could feed into that. However, I think that it's very possible that she's become some sort of artist and some of her artwork is revered by a group of people who are believing in From, or they believe her story, or they actually have knowledge about it. And I think she's in contact with some people that know what's going on, others that she has a group of people that know about what's going on in From or are aware of it, and or some sort of shaman type figure or some Native American. And I think that will be going on some sort of quest on the outside in order to get back in and save this woman's family. And that's my theory.
I like it a lot, Real. I think that everything you said is a total possibility. The thing that I think you're most correct on is 100% the fact that maybe Henry was blamed for the disappearance of his family. I think that's quite likely, especially as Henry is described as having a hard life and being very bitter in the description of his character on online articles.
Awesome. Awesome. Now I will do you the same courtesy and remain quiet until you finish. And if there are things that are similar in our theory, I would love you to point those out as well.
I will do so. Would it be okay if I share my screen?
Absolutely.
Would it? I guess will it make its way into the recording?
Yes, it will. It'll make its way right on point in real time.
Okay, let's see. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about Chekhov's gun first. Chekhov's gun is a narrative principle that states that every element in a story must be necessary, and irrelevant elements should be removed. So, for example, if a writer features a gun in a story on a wall, there must be a reason for describing that gun in the book, in the story. And so, most likely, it'll be used at some time later in the plot. So, for example, James Bond's gadgets, they would not be presented to him on the show if every single one wasn't used in the plot. They don't give him a bunch of gadgets that he doesn't use. That would just waste screen time. So we have the pilot of the show, and every moment is precious to fit in as much as possible because shows are sold on the basis of pilots. It's basically the pilot script that everyone looks at. It's the pilot script that gets shot, and then they decide whether they want to make the rest of it. So the pilot is so important. And actually, the presentation about what happens for the rest of the series is actually less important. Although I imagine John Griffin did as much as he could with the time they allowed him for that. So we have John Griffin. He's the show's creator, and he's the pilot co-writer. And he's been studying screenwriting his entire life. This guy's been doing it his entire life, and he's been trying to get screenplays made his entire life. He's even an Academy Nicholl Fellow, which means he studied it professionally. And then we also have Jeff Pinkner, who's a screenwriting veteran with decades of experience. Now, if you are these two super experienced guys, why would you insert in the opening scene with Jim and the family being introduced a long, pointless discussion about a car Jim once owned many years ago that we don't see for 2 seasons, described it as a death trap, its make, its model, its bad brakes, and having a side door that won't open? They describe it as a champ as well. You know, they spend so much time on this car. Of course, this car is going to come up in season 3. And because they've featured it in episode 1, it's clearly very important to the plot of the show. So it means that someone Jim knows probably drove the car into Fromland, and that will come up in the Spheria later. Then what's the other thing that they discuss in the pilot, in that opening scene with the family, that also doesn't really tell us anything? It's another pointless conversation, unless, of course, there is a point to it, which is about how Tabitha thought that Tabitha's mom wouldn't like Jim, but in the end, surprisingly, she did. And they discussed that for a while. And it takes ages to get through that scene. So again, it doesn't really tell us much about the family. It doesn't tell us much about Tabitha's mom's personality. It's not really explained why she might not like Jim. It doesn't really matter to the plot whether she liked Jim or not. So, you know, it's not very relevant. And we don't see anything to do with this in season 1 or 2 either. So again, this is a long setup to a big reveal. And obviously the big reveal that we've had in season 2 is Eloise, right? So anyway, both Tabitha's mom surprisingly liking Jim and an identifiable hard to escape car that someone drove into Fromland might very well die in because it's hard to escape in a car where the side door doesn't open and the brakes don't work. And then we have hints of time travel in season 2 where we have Jim's bracelet seen on Miranda's wrist. And it's exactly the same time that Eloise is also revealed. And obviously the stuff with Jim and Tabitha's mom and Jim's car, Jim's old car, are also being set up for a big reveal. So what happens after we have Eloise revealed? Well, we have a handy key to show us this is Eloise and this is Victor. And then we have a drawing here with 3 characters. One's Victor, one's Eloise, one maybe Abby, potentially, who may have escaped. That's why she remembers the town as if she's had a dreamed of it as a child. I think that memories are dreams, just like Victor says that maybe dreams are memories. So we have this memory thing going on. Potentially Abby is this blonde character that we see in some of Victor's drawings. And then we have this guy in black to the left that's sort of covered up to make you think, oh, I wonder who this guy is. And then in the next episode, they zoom in and they let you see what this guy looks like. And it's a man with long hair wearing black trousers and a light blue sweater. And doesn't Jim have long hair? And don't Tabitha and Julie discuss getting clothes for Jim in the barn before they see the two kids? And they pick up a sweater that looks a little bit like this. So anyway, let me explain what I think is happening. Catalina Moreno was 39 when season 1 was filmed, 38 when it was cast. If young Victor was 11, which is the actor's age, and also Jeff Pinkner, I think, describes him as 11 in one of his interviews, in 1978, he'd be 55 in season 1. If Eloise is his twin, and actually I don't think she is his twin, I think she's slightly younger. But if Eloise is his twin and Tabitha's playing a character who's only a little bit younger than the actress's age, maybe a year or two younger, then she would be 18 if Eloise was her mother. Sorry, Eloise would have been 18 if she'd had Tabitha at a young age. And maybe it's more like 17 or 16. So here's my thinking. And now I'm gonna drop out of this sharing screen because I'm gonna tell you more verbally what I think is happening. So I'm gonna take it right from what I think will happen in season 3. So let's imagine for a moment that Jim time travels back in time to 1978, and he is the long-haired man in the picture that Eloise drew. Jim has the bracelet at this point, and we'll discuss how the bracelet ended up in Fromland later. But Jim has the bracelet at this point. He goes back to 1978. He then gives the bracelet to Miranda. He's going to go do something dangerous. He gives the bracelet to Miranda and says, "Get this back to my wife." Okay? Miranda now has the bracelet. Now Miranda goes and she's going to go save the children. She's going to go through the bottle tree. They're going to escape, potentially. Miranda's heading for the bottle tree, but she gets captured. Eloise catches up with her. At this point, the boogeyman potentially makes a deal with Miranda saying, "I'll let your son Victor live in exchange for your soul and the souls of everyone else here." Eloise escapes into the tree with Miranda's bracelet. She either collects it from Miranda's dead body, Miranda's Victor's mom and Eloise's mom, or she pulls it from her wrist as she's falling into the tree. Either way, Miranda dies as a result of her deal with the boogeyman, recreating the trolley problem that Jade mentioned, choosing her son over the lives of everyone else, making the morally wrong decision as far as the trolley problem is concerned, according to some people. And Eloise then, with the bracelet, escapes into the real world. But her memories are fragmented, just like Abby's are, just like Victor's are. And she comes back into the real world, and she goes back with her dad, Henry. I think it's fairly established now that everyone's analyzed the trailer, they've zoomed in on the pictures, that Henry is Eloise and Victor's dad. The actor is 73 years old. That's around the right age. He'd have had to have had Victor and Eloise relatively young, but he's the right age to be Victor's and Eloise's dad. Eloise returns to Henry, Victor's dad, and I agree with Real, but this is Real's theory, because he came up with it first, that Henry has been blamed for the disappearance of his family, and now Eloise is back, and she seems mentally ill. She has these dreams of where she's been, of these children, of the bottle tree. She paints them, she draws them, she makes a bottle tree outside her yard to try and jog her memory, but Henry doesn't believe her. At this point, I believe that Eloise runs away from home. This is why Henry has this shrine to Eloise in his basement. He's left her painting studio exactly as she left it in case she ever comes home. Eloise runs away very young, probably 15, 16 years old, because she is pregnant with Tabitha by a Colombian runaway as well. They run away together, they change their names, they start a new life. Now, Eloise is an adult. She's probably a artist, a painter, or I think more likely a painter, a failed painter who became an art historian, an art professor at a university. And I'll explain more about that perhaps in another video. I think that she has to be an art historian because Tabitha is going to go on a Da Vinci Code style quest with her. But in any case, so Eloise has run away. She's changed her name. She's become an artist or an art professor, and she's given birth to Tabitha. Tabitha is now in her 20s. She meets Jim. Jim has his dad's bootlaces, and she decides to copy the bracelet that's on Eloise, her mother's wrist. When she's copying that bracelet, she makes a mistake in the process of making it, making a mark on that bracelet. That mark already exists on the bracelet because it's the same bracelet that has time traveled. Okay. So at this point, Tabitha gives the bracelet to Jim. Fast forward to Tabitha giving birth to Julie. They are driving in the death trap car. They almost get in an accident because of how dangerous it is. In the commotion, Jim's bracelet falls from his wrist in between the couch cushions of the car. They continue to the hospital, and that is when Jim notices that his bracelet is missing, and they think that it has been lost in the hospital. Jim's dad is present for the birth of his granddaughter. That this is the day that he becomes a grandfather. I believe that Jim's father will then be given the keys to this death trap car that Jim's dad that Jim doesn't want anymore because it's so dangerous. Jim's dad then, at a later date, drives into Fromland. He dies in Fromland, or potentially he doesn't, or almost dies. I don't know. But ultimately, the bracelet ends up in this car in Fromland. The car is then scavenged, and the bracelet ends up in the storage room for Tabitha to find, to give to Jim, and then Jim time travels back to 1978, and the cycle starts again, creating a bootstrap paradox, which is very clearly signaled by the fact that the bracelet is made from Jim's dad's bootlaces. Now, a bootstrap paradox requires someone to create the object as a result of encountering the very same object in the future. So basically, you don't know which is the original and which one's the copy, creating a paradox, because ultimately when they're creating the bracelet, they're copying something that wouldn't have existed if they weren't making it in the first place, if that makes sense. I also believe, just as a final cherry on top of this slightly crazy theory, that at some point Ethan will shoot his own grandfather, and Ethan's grandfather will die. And I believe that when someone dies in Fromland, their soul is sort of stored there somehow. And then when the game that's being played in Fromland ends, everyone's soul gets to go back home. Just like Sarah was promised, everyone will get to go home. I think that even included the people who have died. So potentially, Ethan time travels back to 1978 with Jim, kills his own grandfather. The grandfather gets soul gets stored in a tree, and then that round of the game ends. Everyone gets to go home, and that's how you have a grandfather paradox, which is, how do you kill your own grandfather before you're born? If you time travel backwards, wouldn't that mean that you wouldn't be born in the first place? I think that is how the show will include a grandfather paradox as well, because part of his time travel story happens to happen on the day that Jim's dad became a grandfather. So I think they're hinting that there's a grandfather paradox. There's even a drawing of what looks like Ethan shooting someone with a gun. And I think, and this is something that Real pointed out to me, I think that Victor may even give the gun to Ethan, who then takes it with him to 1978, shoots a crazy man, like sort of running in the forest, kills him, and doesn't realize that it's his own grandfather. The round in 1978 ends. The grandfather gets to go back to the real world without any memories, and that's how that happens, potentially. So that's my theory. Thanks very much for listening.
Okay, thank you for that. That was awesome. That was awesome. Um, we both share the same sentiment about Victor's father being blamed for the disappearance of the family. And there are things that are very similar.
That's your theory, man. I'm not taking that. Is you who came up with that. I agree with it. The moment you said it, I agreed with it. But you're the one who came up with it.
Oh, awesome. And we also agree on Eloise possibly continuing her art. I was
Yeah,
always on board with that, with just the simple fact that the mother told, that was the last thing that we saw the mom say to her. Sure,
yeah.
it wasn't the last thing she said to her if she followed her mom and whatnot.
Well,
Um,
because isn't it that originally in Victor's memory, Miranda tells him, keep doing your drawings, which is why he's been drawing all this time. And then when he gets his memories back, we realize that it was actually Eloise that she told to keep doing their drawings. So,
well, no,
so
she told Victor to take care of the sister, and she told Eloise to keep drawing.
Oh, yeah, no, I agree with that in the final version, but I think in the
Right?
original, when Victor has a flashback, I think he has
Mhm.
a flashback and he hears Miranda saying to him, "Keep drawing your pictures." Right?
No,
You don't think so? I
that
think that
doesn't
in the
happen
original version, she tells Victor, and then in the new version, when Eloise is
because
there,
we
it's
only
telling
saw his
Victor.
mom in the second version of his flashback. His mom was we didn't even get to see Victor's mom until we realized that he had a sister. We found out about the mom and the sister at the same time.
Mm, I'm gonna have to check that because I'm pretty sure he originally remembers it as just him, and then we get a much bigger flashback. It may even all happen in the same episode, but I think originally he has a flashback and remembers Miranda saying, "Keep drawing your pictures." I think it's triggered when he sees the
Oh,
crayon
I think you're
the
right.
crayon
Does he have a flashback when he's talking
to
to
Ethan.
Tabitha in his room?
I think it's when he's talking to Ethan and he gets given the pencil case, and maybe that
Okay.
triggers a memory, but it's a false memory. And then later when he goes with Tabitha to the car park, to the junkyard,
The memory is more opened up. Right. Oh, okay, I
that's
remember
when
that now.
Tabitha appears. Because they show both versions, don't they? They flash to it just being him, and then they flash to it being him and Eloise, and they flash it to being him
Yeah, and
again.
then like Eloise comes out the background, like she comes out of
Yeah.
that little closet room.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I think there is a version of it where he is originally the one who she tells to keep doing her pictures, but it was actually a message to Eloise. Eloise was the artist. He was not the artist. So and it got conflated in his head. So I think that's gonna be quite important.
Right.
I
I
think
think he started drawing because she was doing it.
she's
Or
definitely
she
an
told
artist of some kind.
she's who has these visions. It's Eloise is who has the visions because Victor Victor says to Julie about, oh, sometimes things are memories and sometimes things are things you actually saw. And this is what I believe Eloise was telling her mom and her brother, like about her visions that she was having. I think Eloise is the one that was having the visions, and she was the one that had some sort of insight. Um,
It's
because
true, but
she
with
shows that with the Civil War soldiers, and she also shows that with the painting of the ghoulish kids is totally 100% synonymous with Tabitha's vision.
I agree with you there 100%. Although I would say when the Civil War soldier drawings are brought up by Jade, Tabitha replies and said, those are based on stories that told um Miranda told Victor about the Civil War soldiers. And here's something interesting actually.
That's true.
If Jim is going back to 1864, maybe okay, so maybe
But did
Miranda.
she okay, so wait, let's stop. Let's stop right
Yeah,
there for a second. That's interesting.
okay.
Did did Miranda describe the soldiers to her? Did she tell them that they were
Yes.
black soldiers?
Yes.
That
Miranda,
is
she said, "These are
interesting.
based on what Miranda told me."
So
If
what were
we
the stories that she was telling her then? Could
about
it be
these
the massacre of Fort Pillow?
it could be the Massacre of Fort Pillow, but I think more likely Miranda is going to time travel as well. She will meet Jim and Jade in the Civil War, timeline. Oh, no, sorry, it's Jim and Kenny, isn't it? She will meet
Yeah.
Jim and Kenny in the 1860s timeline. They will time travel back to 1978 where she came from, and then Jim will give her the bracelet. Yeah, so Miranda must meet Jim in 1864, or
Do you
technically
think that okay, so this leads to a really good question about the trailer. Do you think that the cabins that we see are there in Fromland now, or are they did they travel back in time?
they travel back in time to 1864, which means the dolls on and I think this because Miranda has the bracelet and Miranda's the one who saw Black Civil War soldiers. Therefore, and Jim seeing the hoodoo from Caroline Die, um, those um, those hoodoo inukis or whatever. I'm pronouncing it wrong. So that means that okay, so that means that Jim and Kenny who have time traveled to 1864. I'm gonna have to add that to my prediction. That must be the timeline they're going to because of Miranda. So they go to 1864. Miranda goes to 1864. Then Jim and Kenny follow her back to 1978. That's interesting. Does that mean that Jim and
So
Kenny are going to
could the so
kill
could
well?
those totems that we see that resemble the Nkisi dolls,
Yeah.
do are they versions of the talisman used in that time period?
Potentially, I think they're being used in a protective way. I don't know. I don't think that they're replacements for the talismans. I think the talismans exist, but that she uses her own magic to protect against the monsters. That's why the bottle tree has the bottles hanging on it, because that's hoodoo protective magic. She's putting those dolls there to protect the town. She's putting dolls there to protect the town from um the monsters. So that's Jim and Kenny arriving in the town, surrounded by these dolls, being protected from the monsters. So they're safe in the town. And they're going to meet Caroline, Tracy, Di, and Miranda. And then OK Ito's going to be there. And Ellis Falls is going to be there. That's who I think we're going to meet the Black Civil War soldier before but like he's going to be normal. He's going to be good. He's going to be like a good guy. And we're going to be wondering why.
Maybe some of the witches from the Salem witch trials, maybe some of the
Yeah,
enchantress
eventually.
from the Roanoke, Virginia time.
I think that Jade and here's what I think happens, right? I think they all go through the bottle tree. Jade, um, holding hands. Jade, Jim, Kenny, and Christy. They all go through the bottle tree because the food's run out and they need to start exploring because they're all just going to die if they stay. So the youngest and fittest people all go through the bottle tree. They all go back to 1864. One of them steps on a bear trap. I think it's Christy. Jade and Kenny help get Christy back to the tree. Jade says, I'll take it from here, jumps back in the tree with Christy. They go to another timeline, maybe 1883, right? Now, Jim and Kenny are alone in 1864. They turn around, they continue exploring because they need to find a source of food or they need to find a way out, right? Because everyone's starving. They keep going, they come across the dolls. Then they meet all the 1864 timeline people. Christy and Jade are going to meet another set of time travel people. I think 1883, if I had to guess, because of the how many clues there are for OK. Maybe they'll try and resolve them simultaneously. The OK Corral and OK Ito. Maybe it'll be like, hey guys, see that we're hiding clues on the show by overusing words. Can you see now? So I think 1883. That's my theory.
Okay. So I wanted to ask you about your theory. Is Wes Craven anywhere in your theory?
Wes Craven. Let me see if he comes up on Wikipedia. He does not. He does not.
Oh,
But he
okay.
could. He could. I'm still working my way through an inventors series of objects. He could. It might end up with him. I think we're gonna meet like 4 or 5 celebrities holding on to like these special artifacts. So Wes Craven, I'm just looking at some of the stuff he's behind. Yeah, dude, it could be. He could be in it. I'll have to work backwards from him or something. Interesting.
The reason why I bring up Wes Craven is because have you ever heard of the Craven Street Bones?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so the Craven Street Bones are a set of bones that were discovered not too long ago. It was around 2000 or 1998 or 90. Actually, some people say that they discovered it in 96. But under the house that was owned by uh, Benjamin Franklin,
Mm.
there were 15 bodies found.
Wow.
And this guy, William Newson, or Hewson, William Hewson, he had a school or some sort of the articles here. You could look it up, check it out. I'll send you the link. But there were over 1,200 pieces of bone retrieved and remnants of an anatomy school run from the house by William Newson, son-in-law of Franklin's landlady Margaret Stevenson. Hewson, who married Margaret's daughter Polly in 1770, is best known for his research on the blood and lymphatic system, on blood and the lymphatic system. He isolated key proteins in the blood clotting process, fibrogen, and called it coagulable lymph. Okay. So this guy was like kind of revolutionary with things. And we talked about the relevance of Ben Franklin. And I
Mhm.
kind of find it dope that under the box is where Boyd hid for that first night as well. Um,
Mm.
they
Mhm.
put the box directly on the top of the hiding spot that they had. Remember that they went in?
Yeah, yeah. I think the word box is definitely a clue on the show. You got the box, you've got the music box, you got people, you got boxes of things everywhere, all the
Mm-hmm.
time. I think that there's a boxing character in the 1883 timeline, like a boxing champ, and also in the 1930s timeline.
Mm.
So I think that'll be interesting.
Okay. And so,
Also, Pandora's box, by the way. I think Pandora's box features on this show.
right, I remember you were talking about that in reference to the music box. That's a very interesting bit as well. But
And
yeah, I just
when the box gets destroyed, you know how they mention hope?
mhm.
Well, Pandora's box, it released all the evils in the world except for one thing, hope.
Mm.
So it's
Okay.
interesting that when the box gets destroyed, they talk about hope, considering Pandora's box, um, was the box that
Now
was
I
loaded.
I want to bring up that on the anatomy school thing. In a lot of these schools, um they would have the barber poles outside. They would
Yeah,
have barber poles at a lot of these schools because the barber pole represented the blood and the red and blue veins and the oxygenated and deoxygenated blood and
yeah,
the
yeah,
white
yeah,
blood cells. These
yeah.
are the things that the barber pole represented, and barbers would take part in like um amputating limbs and things like that. What this guy was doing here, he was doing experiments on people. He was dissecting bodies and all kinds of stuff. And as you see here, he was doing things with the skull and things of that nature. And I just thought that was interesting. That kind of came to me. Another thing
I like
was
it.
the um there was another reference, and I think I spoke to you about this reference. Hold on, let me see. What was this that I wanted to ask you
So
about on this call?
something about autopsies, perhaps?
Uh
Did
no,
we
it
have
was the
we have
memento mori. Oh yeah, it was Lord Byron.
Yeah.
The Lord
Yeah,
Byron stuff. Lord
yeah.
Byron. Let me bring up some of that.
I
Lord
think
Byron.
the skull that we see in the trailer is Lord Byron's drinking skull cup. It eventually becomes that in the future.
I wouldn't be surprised if that, or I wouldn't be surprised if there is some connection to that in the Skull and Bones Society, or not the Skull and Bones Society, the Order of the Skull and Bones, because this guy created something called the Order of the Skull. And I wonder if it has something to do with that. There's the skull reference there. There's the Puritan reference. The Puritans are literally who brought the memento mori term to the states and made it popular. They put that aesthetic all over their graveyards. It was everywhere. You could see it still to this day in a lot of the New England states. So I just thought that that was very interesting. The Lord Byron stuff is interesting. This guy, he also had the club foot. I wonder if we'll see someone like that. I thought that was interesting because we see someone get caught in a bear trap.
Yeah, and we got
So
Ethan injuring his leg,
we have
and
Ethan
walking around
injuring
on the
his leg as well. Yes.
and in
Yes.
the opening scenes of the trailer, not the trailer, in the intro song, you also have a crutch leaning up against the wall with some stickers of butterflies next to it.
Yes. So this, this could definitely be ringing to that as well. Oh man, we just dropped some jewels on that. The Lord Byron stuff is definitely significant. However, the skull goblets were very common at one point in time, where there's a lot of them throughout history in multiple different cultures. When the trailer came out and the first live that I did after the trailer, people were talking about Kali and um uh many different cultures that practice drinking from a skull.
Yeah, the Vikings supposedly did it as well. And I think it's even mentioned in Beowulf once, potentially.
Oh, yeah. I
Yeah,
remember asking you about Beowulf and does it have any significance to this? Because
I think it
there are a
might.
lot of deities within the Beowulf lore.
It could. It could. I
Um,
think it a corrupted version of the story of the Norse timeline in Newfoundland in Vinland eventually becomes the story of Beowulf in the lore of the show.
mm, okay. So you're saying this predates the stuff with Beowulf.
Absolutely, absolutely. This goes all the way back to the Garden of Eden. Like I
What?
am certain of that now.
Oh, okay. So this you say okay, so you're saying they're going like full one religion route with this?
No, there are 17 timelines on this show, and
Okay.
about half of them have a different mythology associated with them. And what it really
Okay,
is
so what I
okay.
think all right, so on that, here's my thoughts on that. I
Mhm,
think that they are actually making it like different religions battling with Christianity,
mhm.
other religions.
They,
Um,
yeah, the Catholic Church is not gonna come out of this series looking very good. That's all I can say.
right.
They're gonna look
Exactly.
terrible. They're gonna look
I
terrible.
I haven't really released anything on that yet because I'm still doing some soul searching on it and to really figure out like how it fits. It's kind of like the same thing with the Jim Crow stuff that I noticed and the root stuff. I thought I was bugging out until the last episode and we see Jay finds the roots. And then I was like, man, I wish I would have put this stuff out because I was right about that. Like then he finds the roots. I was just, I just didn't want to seem like I was reaching with the whole Fiddler and Toby thing. You know what I'm saying? Like, but then
Real, I
him
think
finding
you've gotta reach if you're trying to solve this show, if you're scared to reach, you will never solve anything, right? And I think you do reach in a reasonable way, but I mean, I don't think you should ever be afraid of reaching when you're trying to solve this show, because
right,
frankly, every clue solve is a reach. Every single clue solve is debatable, which is why so many people dislike like the evidence that I give for some of my theories, because they don't make it like, oh, that connects to this and it's certain. It's like that might connect to this, and then this other thing that leads to it also maybe connects to this. And you have to put all these connections together and then decide this is true. But there is no such like this show. If it had easy answers and people didn't need to reach and like try and make a vague clue fit, then we'd never solve anything, right?
right. I agree. I agree with that. The thing is, I just at the time, see, I didn't want to be that guy that brought like
Mm,
that type of
crazy.
subject into this theories and shows,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
But once they released that it was him that finds the actual roots, oh, I was like, yeah, well, this is fair game now. It's not like I wrote this shit. Like they put it in there. I'm just saying what's in there. You know what
Yeah,
I mean?
I was scared to talk about this show, because of how much history it covers, but ultimately You know, no, you're literally just theorizing about what someone else might have written, aren't you? So,
Right.
so if you get it wrong, you're not saying this is what I would have written, or even saying this is what I think is morally correct or the correct version of history. But all you're saying is maybe the writers think that way. So I don't think you can be offensive when you're theorizing.
Well, here's the thing, like a lot of people in America find that stuff offensive. You know what I'm saying? They find it offensive and they don't want to hear about certain things. What I find strange about that is when I talk about it being like the Native Americans and what they went through and they something happened to them, you're totally fine with that. But the moment I bring up anything like the Jim Crow or anything like that, there's a problem. You know what I'm saying? It's like, oh no, that's not it. You're bringing you
Yeah.
view the world through a Jim Crow lens, and this is
No, no, no. The
you
clues are there,
know
man. No, the clues
the
are there.
clues
I'm
are
saying it
there.
now. The clues are
And
there.
it's crazy because I've said this before. Like I'm one that I don't want to see that shit in my TV shows either. Like there's enough of that every time you just
If it's
go on
forced,
social
right?
media, right?
If it's
Right.
forced,
If it's forced and it doesn't actually push the story forward, right? But this totally pushes the story forward. It's totally plausible. And if we're going to agree that those are Puritans there, then
I
that
agree.
is just yet another clue to a totally different time period, right?
Yes.
It's a
That's why I'm saying
totally
there's
different
multiple
time period.
timelines. Multiple
Right. They
timelines.
showed us Civil War soldiers, but then they show us Puritans, two total different time periods. Then you have all of the dates on the wall. So they're showing you that there's different time periods, different cycles, different things that have happened. I think there are actually more dates. What is the date that is to the far right and it's the most debatable one? Because I think I found
1931.
something for it.
So some people think that 1883 looks a little bit like 1888, but I'm 99% sure that it's 1883. I also
Right.
just wanted
That
to
three
share
the
this.
way they did the threes with the angles could be like, could be. I think they did that on purpose. But I'm talking about the small one on the right. It's like 17 something.
Oh, I don't know.
Let me see.
Um,
I have it
can I just
here.
share my screen for a second?
Sure.
This is the guy that I think we see. I think that Jade sees this guy with the boulder. You know the guy at the boulder in the root cellar.
Yes.
This is the guy, Giles Corey. He was an accused witch from Salem from the Puritan times, whose death was very unusual. He was crushed to death by boulders.
Mm.
You
Say
can see
what?
it here.
Say what now? Bring it. What's
Giles
his name?
Giles Corey, who was a accused witch at Salem, who died being pressed to death, is the same guy that Jade sees in the root cellar with the giant boulder crushing him to death.
Okay, so where's his all right, so what else do we have other than the fact that he was crushed with a boulder? Like, does it tie it to the show? Like
Well,
like
there's a
is there
there's a
anything about him that like we can look at? Like, you know what I'm saying?
he's one of the most famous witches from Salem, the Salem witch trials.
Oh
And
wow.
yeah, like he's one of the main ones. Um, and in fact, he's probably one of the most famous because he was crushed to death by boulders. Um, I think that's what we're seeing on the show. So what's interesting is the timeline. The timeline that we see is actually years before Salem happens. It's years before Salem happens. It's actually 1672, right? So the Salem witch trials happened in 1692. Um, so what does that tell you? It's 20 years before. So these are the people actually, all the witches in Salem, all the people involved, well, not all of them, but a lot of them, um, they end up in Fromland, and then when they go back to the real world, they all get accused as witches and get killed. There's
Mm.
even a guy called Increase Mather, who was the let me see if I can find him. Here we go. He was one of the um he was one of the judges in the Salem witch trials, and on the show, they use the word increase in a very awkward way, where Jim says, when Donna's telling them about the food running out, and he's like, it's exactly what they would want. They would be trying to increase the stress level. So that is a
Right,
use
right,
of the word
right.
increase on the show,
When they were in the
and it's
kitchen.
very awkward. It's an awkward use of it. Doesn't it feel forced in
Yes,
that
it did.
phrasing?
It did. It did feel forced. I
So
said
so
that as
this
soon as they
guy,
did it.
so again, this guy, he was um he was alive in 1672, but he hadn't been to Salem yet, but he was involved in like witch stuff before this. So what I think is going to happen is on the show when they time travel back in time, we're going to meet all the Salem witches 20 years before they get killed in Salem. So we're going to meet Increased Mather, we're going to meet Tatuba, we're going to meet who's the other one? Giles Corey. We're going to meet a whole bunch of people called Goody. So, did you know that in the time of the Puritans, women, when they reached a certain age, they would become known as Goody? And there are like a whole bunch of these Goody witches. So there's Goody Susanna Martin, Goody Ann Glover, Goody Elizabeth Proctor. These are all people who are accused of being witches. There's even a witch who was called Sarah Good. Now, why am I bringing this up? Because on the show, good is used 233 times. The word good.
That's heavy.
They use it all the time. Like even in the opening episode, that you got you got Mr. Liu calling Christy a good girl. You got people saying good night, good girl all the time. They're saying good, where they finish sentences with good. Well, that's good news. Let me keep running through some. Now's not a good time, Jim. Do you think that's a good sign? That's good for you. We clear? Good. Ooh, they're actually really good. You don't look good. I haven't had a good night's sleep for a while. I believe in my heart that for the good of everyone in this town. So anyway, look, that's 19 of like 233 examples. So the word good, I believe, is a clue to many of these witches from the Salem witch trial. Yeah.
Okay, so I like how you brought up the boulder. Let me pull up something here that I found about a sacred red rock.
Oh yeah, the red rock is very interesting. It might be one of the biggest clues in the trailer that everyone's sort of ignoring.
Yes, the red rock. Now, we were talking about this in the live, and in the live we were saying that the red boulder, Jade touches that boulder, and that's what starts his vision with the Puritan guy drinking from the skull. Um, I'm with that all the way because it'd be very similar to how he touched the tree and the vision started. So him touching the boulder. Now, this boulder here is a sacred red boulder. Okay. Sacred red rock unveiled. A remarkable journey of rediscovered and repatriation. And it talks about a Suez Indian culture and the Eden Prairie. I don't even MD Wakantan. Um, that tribe. They they held this uh they held this rock very sacred to their culture because and they would come and put their hands on it and they would it represented them and them being close to their land and the earth and other spiritual things about it. But for a decade, the large sandstone rock measuring approximately 5 feet across and 4 feet tall, with an irregular shape, resided in front of the yard of Kathy Case and her husband Ron Eden's prairie home off Pioneer Trail. Case, the president of the Eden Prairie Historical Society, said Ron, who has been the city's mayor since 2019 and on the city council for many years, was told by a neighbor, Mike McGraw, that he thinks the lost sacred rock is behind his barn. So this rock was lost in history, and it was a rock that was revered by these people, and it was taken from them by someone purchasing the land. And throughout the years, that bit of history had been covered up and forgotten for so long. However, it was an old tale probably around the community, and it was passed down by, oral tradition. And it probably wasn't in many books or anything like that, but the people knew about this rock, and they probably knew where it was the whole time. But um lo and behold, and you could do your research. I like to send people on their research, you know what I'm saying? But like, I'm gonna definitely like dive into this and find more historical facts about it. Little is known about it. It's kind of like the Talk thing, like where their history and stuff has kind of been like covered up and forgotten about, you know. Yeah, so I just wanted to point that out, that here yet again we have some sort of symbolism. The big red rock that he puts his hand on. Um, it is yet to be known for sure that, pardon me, that he has a dream or a vision after touching this, but I can totally see that happen, and I, totally see that happen. And a shout out to the chat for pointing that out. There were several people that were saying that, so I think that was dope.
Sweet, man. Well, I think that's a very interesting theory. I do think that there are clues to Plains Native American traditions on the show. There are Sundance references. I think Crazy Horse will be one of the historical figures we'll meet in 1864. In fact, I'm certain of it. I think that he'll be in his role as a sacred clown in that. So I would be interested to see if that red rock is near where Crazy Horse operated in during his lifetime. Um, I have
What
my own
time
theory.
period did you say? What time period did you say they travel back to when they see those cabins?
1864. I'm certain
So
that.
let's be clear on this. You think that Jim and Kenny going to those cabins is time travel?
100%.
That is a very interesting theory, and I love it. I'm not mad at it at all. So where are they? Are they in another spot of Fromland? And how do they travel through time? Is it just from walking through a certain part of the forest and you travel back into a different part of time, or so? Like, how do they get back in time? Do they go back through a bottle tree or what?
I think it's the bottle tree or it's the storage room. The only reason I think it's the storage room is that in Stephen King's films and TV series or whatever, and in his books, there is a cafe, there's a diner where like you go into the storage area and you time travel back to the time of the Kennedy assassination. Um, and
Yeah, I
that's like a
remember
big.
that.
So I wonder if they would locate the time travel in the diner in an homage to Stephen King, who will later make a cameo on the show, in my opinion.
That was a very good short series. I watched it twice.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
Yeah, I watched it twice. It was real. I mean, I watched it back to back. As soon as I got done, I went right back to episode one because I knew they weren't coming back with anything more with it, and I knew it was just a short thing. But I watched it twice. It was some real good stuff in there, and there are a lot of similarities to From in there. Even the character choices, the way that they're dressed, uh, a lot of the dialogue. You find a lot of similar dialogue in there. I found a lot of similar dialogue in what was the one that just came out, and it was pretty good, where the guy made the cube and he traveled to the different dimensions. Dark Matter. Dark Matter had a lot of similar, well, a lot of the same dialogue as From, and it also has some, like one of the songs, like we got to get out of this place is they play that several times in that show. I thought that show was really good.
Mhm.
It was
Mhm.
faster paced than From is, but it was still a slow burn. Like, but it was a really good show.
I
I
enjoyed it.
think I'm gonna yeah, I think I'm gonna cover the whole season, do a video about the whole season, and then drop that. There's a lot of esoteric stuff in there, but it was just like it was just like the typical esoteric vibe. It didn't really mean anything, right? It didn't mean anything that had anything to do with the mystery. Now that's where From is different because the esoterics in From actually answer questions about what the mystery is. Like, you see what I'm saying? They made a lot of Native American references in uh what was the one that they just canceled? Outer Range. I mean, it's full of a ton of stuff, but
Yeah, I like
and
that
they
show, Outer Range. I just thought it was a little slow. That was the only thing I'd
the
criticize.
second season picked it up really good though.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
The first
Um,
season was so slow I forgot a lot of it. I had to go watch it again. It was real slow.
yeah, yeah. May I tell you what I think the red rock represents?
Yes, absolutely.
So, do you know how many times the word check is used on the show?
No. How many?
It's used 25 times. So, in fact, the first words that are said after the intro song, um, with Sarah saying goodnight, is checkmate. So check is a reference to a board game that's being played in the world of From. There's a ancestor to chess, a four-player game called Chaturaji, that is being played here, and that's also why there are elephant references on the show. But however, I think check the word check is also a clue to another game that is being played here. Now you will have noticed that there are checkered floors everywhere, checkered shirts everywhere, checkered blankets everywhere.
Mhm.
And obviously, the word check is used a lot. So I'll just give you a few examples. I'm going to go check on the boy from the crash. I'm going to, check out the town, turn over a few stones. I just came back to check on you guys, right? Look at this one. This one is so obvious. Go away. I can help you look. I'm good at finding stuff. I'm not looking. I'm checking. What are you checking? You ask a lot of questions. That was only three. I can help you check. So look, they use check three times there, and they specifically call out the word checking in that discussion. So, um, as I've tried to explain before in multiple videos, I believe that what we're seeing on the show is like a metaphorical representation of like a giant board games table covered in board games that's double sided, and we're in the American side of From, which is one side of the board, and on the other side is there's like a Canadian version. And all these games are games that existed in 1498, basically. These are games that are medieval, and they're the ancestors to many of our modern board games. And many of these board games we've actually seen on the show in the background. And one of the board games that I believe is being played here is checkers. Now, the colonists, I believe that they make this board game table themselves. Although they have a few board games that they brought with them, most of it they make it themselves. So I think in this case, they used rocks. And the game I'm referencing is a game called Checkers. And checkers was basically always played with black rocks or gray rocks and red rocks. When game pieces were more streamlined and beautiful, they'd be red pieces and black pieces typically. So, in my opinion, the rocks that we see strewn around on the show are potentially game pieces, and the red rock is a checkers game piece. And if we were to see more in season three, episode one, two, or three, or whatever, and we see that there's more than one red rock lying around, there isn't just one red rock, but we see a few of them, and then we see black rocks around them potentially, or gray rocks, then I would suggest that that is to tell us that these are game pieces with two color schemes, where they're using pebbles as game pieces. That's it. Thank you for listening.
No, that's dope. I was thinking that the checkered floors and the checkered patterns were a reference to Solomon's temple, and like the Masonic aspects. And I'm thinking that even more now that we're talking about the memento mori and we see them drinking from a skull. We're talking
Solomon's
about.
Temple Solomon's
Yeah,
Temple is very important on the show. It's where a lot of the religious artifacts come from. Um,
right.
Fascinating. There's a whole Templar section of the show with this guy called Henry Sinclair, who and like the Lost Templar treasures and the Holy Grail. So okay, so this is super interesting. So Solomon's Temple had a checkered floor.
Yes, and this is why they do that in the Masonic temples.
I need to Google that and look into that. Thank you,
And
Real,
the
for sharing.
Masonic temples are okay, so it is a part of Freemasons moral law where it represent the black and white represent good and evil, form and chaos, or substance and oblivion. They That's what those dualities represent. And so yeah, that's where
Yeah,
I thought that was
dude,
making a reference
that
to Solomon's temple,
it
also the
is a
Ark of the
reference to
Covenant.
Solomon's Temple. I
Yes.
can guarantee you it is. It's just also a reference to board games at the same time. On this show,
Well,
multiple
that's what
clues.
board games are referencing. Most of your board games, even your football field, your baseball field, your the basketball field, the basketball court, the balls that are involved with these games, all of them have these different esoteric mathematic systems incorporated, embedded within them that represent different things. I remember reading some material by a guy named Scott Onstott, and he had a video series called Secrets in Plain Sight, where he pretty much broke a lot of that down. And I'm talking about, man, I had to watch this when like YouTube was a baby. Like YouTube was not really like a thing that a lot of people were using, and I was using it back then. And it wasn't that long ago, but some of that information definitely was what I was searching on. Um, and the goat references that they're making as well that I see in the show. Boyd brings back the goat. A lot of people will refer that to Baphomet. Um, but I would think that they're not using it as the Baphomet. I think they're using it as Timothy, which is the inverted way to say Baphomet is Timothy. And I also think that they're talking about the bathed in mathematics. That's that's one of the that's one of the derivatives of Baphomet is bathed in mathematics, Baphometus. And
Do you
so
know who were accused of worshipping Baphomet?
who?
The Templar.
The Templar. I know exactly. That's where
And
I know all of this.
they had an inquisition and trials, and they raided Solomon's Temple, and that's where they got the Holy Grail. I even think that the board game table that is being used is in fact the table of showbread.
I think I even know where the show writers and the people that are making these particular decisions, I think I know the course of research that they study. I really do because I already went through it years and years ago. Like I'm spitting this shit right off the top of my head. This is what I used to study when I used to study this shit at the age of 13, man. Like I was already on like I read Bill Cooper's book, Behold the Pale Horse, when I was 13. I read it in 1993. One of my old heads put me onto that book. And that book really changed my entire life. That's why I'm like I am actually. From reading that book at such an early age, understanding what it was trying to say, and then looking at the movies and looking at like, oh man, this dude said this shit was gonna happen in 1993. Like he said this all in the book. So I was on that back then, and now seeing this, like, yeah, I totally see that. The reason why I haven't focused on it much, and I'm going to tell you why, is because You can look at damn near every movie and television show and see the duality Masonic symbol from the Templar. It's in almost every TV show or movie. It's everywhere. Checkerboard floors. Somebody's wearing a checkered shirt. The villain's wearing a checkered this or that. Like it all
Mm.
is everywhere in every movie. Damn near every major movie you see. And that's why I didn't really spend too much time on it. But now when I look at it, the actual reference to this stuff has more to do with the religious connotation. It's worth looking into and kind of like peeking in there. Now that they show me somebody drinking from a skull and shit like that, I'm like, hold on, wait a minute. This right here has something to do with this area of study. We got to go back and look at this, and they're not approaching it in the typical way that you see it used. I mean, shit, it's in Batman all the way down to whatever movie you can think of. Pretty much, you'll see it. The Barbie movie had the same symbolism with the checkerboards and shit in it. Like it's in every movie. Go check. Like now you'll probably see it. It's probably like when you get that car and then you start seeing it on the road everywhere and shit. But like you'll start it's in every they put that in everything. And I just think that the reason why they do so, and here we are, just a little bit of tinfoil juice for you. I think the reason why they do that is because Hollywood is kind of controlled by that group of people. I think that the group of people that run your secret societies are in the business of things like Hollywood and media, journalism, and all of that to control the ideas and thoughts and suggestions of the people that are unprivy to their circle. And I'll land my plane right there.
You never know. You never know.
Oh, I mean, where you see so many coincidences in one place, you can't really say that they're coincidences anymore. They now become coincidences. They're not coincidences, but they are now coincidences, as in incidences that are cooperating or co-working together. And I mean, that's the same thing. That's the same journey in the level of thought that it takes to figure out one of these shows. All the coincidences can't be a coincidence. It has to be a coincidence, right? Like the connections that you're making, these things cannot be there coincidentally,
Sorry, I was
right?
on mute there. Yes, I agree with you, Real. I do agree. There's a lot of coincidences on this show that can't be explained away. Um, it's but that's what a lot of people want to believe at the moment. When you explain a clue to them, Real, I'm sure people are like, "That's not what it means," or like, "That doesn't fit perfectly," so that can't be it.
Okay, so that should lead us into a little for this conversation. Um, that should lead us into a little pushback on one another, right? So I'm gonna push back real quick. You're 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 making these connections, and you are saying that these actual archetypes, or what I shouldn't even say archetypes, if you're saying that they're going to actually end up as characters in the show.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that they're gonna hire Stephen King to play himself, and Tabitha is gonna hang out with him, and Stephen King will narrate some of the explanation of the mythology of the show.
Ho ho ho! Whoa!
Absolutely. And Stephen Fry will do the same. Either Stephen Fry, Hugh Laurie, or the other one is who was part of their trio. She was in Love Actually.
That
Uh,
yo, let me say something. Stephen King has appeared in movies and TV shows and played himself numerous times already. If he did that shit in From and did what you just said that he would do as far as breaking down some of the actual thing, it would be crazy if they brought him in as a character to play like the big bad or something. That would be real interesting. But
he will be
because
playing himself, in my opinion. Like he will
right,
actually be
okay. So
himself,
I'll give
Stephen
you the
King.
Stephen King one. I'll give you that one.
Okay,
I
go for it.
wouldn't be mad at that because Stephen King is alive. I don't think they would hire anyone else to play him.
And
Um,
I think they've reached out to him and they said, "Stephen King, before we, like, write this into the show, would you be cool with, like, doing a few scenes as yourself in our TV series?" And he said, "Yes, and I'm gonna watch this show when it comes out." And then boom, the day From comes out, Stephen King does multiple tweets promoting the show because he likes
yeah,
it, because he's gonna be on it. I think
yeah.
Stephen Fry is gonna be the other person who explains something to Tabitha. And then lastly, I think it's either going to be Tim Burton or potentially Neil Gaiman. I actually think that Neil Gaiman's writing and concepts, this archetype stuff, the Sandman story that he's written, the American Gods stories that he's written, I think are so similar to the show that the showrunners won't be able to resist having him as a character on the show. However, if this sexual assault charge stuff, uh, you know, becomes a really big deal, he may be pulled and they may go to Tim Burton instead. I don't even know what they're going to do now.
Oh shit.
But Neil Gaiman, I think, as far as the showrunners were planning it, I think Neil Gaiman is going to have a ring, a special ring, and they're going to say, "Oh, can we have the ring?" And he's going to say, "Oh, I gave the ring to I gave the ring to a museum," and it's going to be. I'm going to show you it. I'm going to show you the ring. Like, I actually think I know the specific ring that they're going to make a replica of on the show, and Tabitha is going to wear. And I will show it to you right now. Here it is. This ring, Erasmus's ring. I think that this ring is passed down across history. I think it starts off as
Scroll up a little bit.
sorry,
Oh yeah, there we go.
there.
Now
So
we cooking.
I think it starts off as Joseph's ring, then Prometheus's ring, then the ring of Gyges, then it becomes Solomon's ring, then it becomes Mark Antony's signet ring, then it becomes the ring of Eluned, then Cleodna's ring, Odin's Draupnir ring, then potentially Edward the Confessor's ring, I don't know, then Bridget of York's wedding ring, and then finally it becomes Erasmus's ring. I believe that this ring has been passed across time. After it reaches Leonardo da Vinci and Erasmus, it then goes on to a whole bunch of composers like Bach, Handel, Beethoven, Wagner. And it goes through Tolkien. It goes through C.S. Lewis, Enid Blyton, Roald Dahl, Ian Fleming, Truman Capote, Albert Einstein, a whole Salvador Dali, Pablo Picasso. All of these people owned this ring and passed it between each other until it ended up with Neil Gaiman or Tim Burton. And then he gives it to a museum, and then Tabitha needs to heist it from the Tower of London in like the final season of From. That's my theory.
Okay, so can you bring that back up?
Oh, sorry. Let me Erasmus's ring. Sorry, I thought we were done with it. Let me share it. Share. Great.
To me, that looks like the ring that Beetlejuice wears.
Oh my
And
god.
I was
Should we look it up?
say again.
Should we look up the Beetlejuice ring
Oh
and compare
yeah, I
them?
have it. Hold on, let me find it. Let me find it.
Beetlejuice's ring.
Uh,
Is it like an item on the show? Like, is it a like an important
they
ring?
don't talk about it at all. However, you know me. You know me. I totally found it, and okay, it's not. It doesn't look just like it, but it's definitely reminiscent of it. Let me bring it up. I think I could share both our screens.
Oh, is that true? That's cool. So,
Uh,
Erasmus believed that this guy on his ring was Terminus, the god Terminus, but
hmm
it actually was Bacchus, the god of wine, or
Oh, it took
Dionysus.
you.
It's
Okay.
okay. We don't need to look at it. We can look at yours. Let's zoom in.
Okay, let's see.
Oh, sweet. Yeah. Yeah, there's a little similarity there. It looks like a red stone potentially.
Yes. And I dove into this on the video as well, in the Beetlejuice video. Yeah. This is I wonder, in the trailer it shows him looking at the number. I wonder if in the trailer he has on that ring. Definitely gonna go back and look at that. The new trailer confirmed everything I said in my video as far as what my prediction was about who Beetlejuice is. I was totally right on it. I was
Hmm.
100% right on it. And they put out a teaser, and that's when I did my video, and back in March. And I uncovered a lot, broke down a lot, and I told you exactly who Beetlejuice was. And he's a demon. Beetlejuice is not one just like this person that died. He's an actual demon and everything. I show you all the different archetypes that he tries to represent and trick. He's a trickster demon, and he tries to trick people in different time periods. He was there around the bubonic plague and everything. He references it, like, yeah, so I broke that down, and I talk about his ring as well. I brought out some dope information. But so you're saying that this ring here, that the ring that you just were showing us, is a ring that um ends up in the hands of Solomon?
Yeah, it does. In my theory, Solomon's ring is the same ring. It like changes over time. Like I think
Mhm,
Cleopatra has it adapted to look to be the god of wine because
mhm,
Mark Antony was a big drinker. So it goes to Mark Antony first, and then
mhm.
and then it ends up with Solomon.
Okay,
Yeah,
so Solomon's
Solomon
ring is
first.
the Solomon seal, right? Which is pretty
Yeah.
much the Merkaba.
I think on the
And
show they make the ring and the seal different things, but yes, they're often conflated. Absolutely.
Right. Solomon Seal is like the 6 point star, pretty much the Merkaba,
Oh
and
yes.
he and this. Okay, so here's the thing: the Merkaba is significant to Tabitha leaving that tower. They're using like the flower of life all over the windows and in those reflector panes. And you're saying that those reflector panes are like the ones in Cape Race that we're going to, right?
Sorry, can you say that again?
You're saying that the reflector panes and the tower are like the ones in Cape Race.
Yes, yes. I believe that they have gone to the trouble of creating a lighthouse that has all the unique features of Cape Race Lighthouse to tell us, guess the lighthouse. If you know it's Newfoundland, try and guess the lighthouse that we're referencing here. And so I spent ages going, and there's a absolute ton of lighthouses in Newfoundland. And I went through a ton of them, and I finally ended up with Cape Race Lighthouse with its radio station that was decommissioned in 1965, which is why the monsters look like they're black and white sitcom characters
I
because they
love
don't.
that theory, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, it's
Not to
got to be
cut you off,
something.
I love the theory about why the monsters look that way with the radio waves and stuff. They talk about radio waves all the time. We've talked about the four elements before as well. The
Yes,
fire from the
yes,
torch, the fire in the lighthouse. You have the water at the Brundles. You have
yes.
earth is like the rock, the graves. Multiple things could be the earth, and then you have I couldn't figure out which one was wind, and then you said perhaps the radio waves. Yeah.
They have
Okay.
they use the word air a lot. Like people say, I need some air. Um, I just need to see if it's air or blood compressing his lungs. His airway's clear. We got to support the airway, keep the airway open. I was crying at the airport. So air is also referenced on the show. So what is it? Earth, fire. Obviously, Elgin says water. So we know water's on there. Fire, obviously, that's used a lot. So what are we left with? Is it earth? Is that what it's called? Earth or soil? Is it earth?
Earth.
All right, let's see how many times. I mean, we see planet Earth on the show. Oh, here we go. Yeah. It's used 3 times. And so we commit to the earth, Lauren and Megan Pratt. That's 1. They adapt to the notion that the earth could just open up and swallow them at any given moment. And thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So boom, all 4 elements are referenced on the show.
Oh, and you know what else? Cape Race has a lot to do with the radio signals that were sent to the Titanic.
Yes, I mentioned that in the last show. Very,
You
very
did?
important. Oh, yes. Yes, yes. We even looked at the smokestacks on that image together.
That's right. We talked about that. We talked about the smokestacks. I remember.
So remember, they reference ice a lot on the show, and the Titanic was hit by an iceberg just off the coast of Newfoundland. And also, Jim does a Mayday signal that sounds very, very similar to the Mayday signal that the Titanic put out. You know, Mayday, Mayday. Very specific, isn't it, that he uses Mayday instead of saying, hello, is anyone
Also,
there?
I'll give you another one. When the lights flashed, when Tabitha got up and started digging in the basements, the lights flashed in like a Morse code kind of signal.
Yeah, I've posted that on a few like Morse code Reddits, and everyone said it's not Morse code. Like they were like, this, if someone's supposed to identify this using Morse code, like they would never succeed. Like this is, I'm an expert in Morse code. I use it in the army all the time, and this is not Morse code. So, but it seems
Okay.
like it to me. It seems like it. I wish it
It does
was.
look like that. It
I
does
wish
look
it
like
was.
that.
I wish
That
it
would have
was.
been crazy. Yo, what does Kenny's father say in Chinese? I had went and went through the trouble of having it uh what's the translated,
Um,
and I couldn't really find anything.
my girlfriend is Cantonese, or she speaks Cantonese, and when she told me what it meant, it was basically the same thing he says in English, either before or after he says he speaks in Mandarin.
So what
So
did he
something
say?
like, "I want to see my son," or something like that.
It sounded to me, I heard when I translated it, he said something about beans.
Bean?
Yeah, like something about beans or something about like food
Oh, she didn't.
or
She didn't hear that.
feeding. And then he said something about beans or seeds.
Oh, maybe
Yeah.
I'll ask her to listen to it again.
I gotta go find it again. I don't know where I put it as, probably in my download folder because I had to download the transcript of it. So it's probably in there somewhere. I don't know what I probably named it Kenny's father. I'm gonna look for it, find it, and play it again on our next stream if I can find it. But yeah, it was something to do with beans, and he mentions the color yellow. The color yellow was in there. I
Oh,
don't know
interesting.
what variation of Chinese I translated it into.
Hmm.
I don't know if it was Cantonese or
It's
whatever.
definitely Cantonese. I've asked.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I might have done it, but he brought up the color yellow in there in the translation. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I remember yellow. I remember feeding beans or seeds
Well,
and the color.
seeds are
Yeah,
definitely a clue on the show, by the way.
yeah, definitely all the way around.
They like, do you know how often the actors just drop random seed emojis and sprout emojis in their social media posts? It's like gotten ridiculous now. They use it so
Really?
often. Yes, man. 100%.